They shamed the widow for her size until a cowboy's twins chose her as family. She had lived in the town for many years, yet she still felt like a stranger. People knew her face, her slow walk, and the way she kept her eyes lowered when passing others on the dusty road. They knew her more for her body than for her name. To them, she was the widow, spoken of in quiet laughs and side glances. Very few remembered that she was once a smiling young woman with dreams, love, and a full life ahead of her. After her husband passed away, the house became too quiet. The walls held memories that spoke louder than any person. Every corner reminded her of shared laughter, late-night talks, and simple joys like drinking tea together at sunrise. When he was gone, it felt as if part of her left with him. Still, life did not stop asking for effort. Bills came, work was needed, strength was required, even when the heart felt tired. She started doing small sewing and mending jobs from home. Fixing torn clothes, adjusting old dresses, and stitching blankets became her way to survive. Her hands were skilled, careful, and patient. People trusted her work, even if they did not respect her as a person. They would knock on her door, hand over fabric, say only what was needed, and leave quickly, as if kindness might cost them something. Each morning she woke before the sun. She swept the front step, boiled water for tea, and sat quietly for a moment before the day began. That short silence was her only peace. She would remember her husband's voice, telling her she was strong, that she mattered. Those words were like a small light she carried inside her, especially when the outside world felt cold. When she walked through town, she felt eyes on her. Some people whispered, some smiled in a way that did not reach their eyes. Children repeated things they heard from adults, not fully understanding the hurt they caused. She never answered back. She believed silence was safer than words. Fighting would only bring more attention, and she had learned that attention rarely brought kindness. At the local market, she bought only what she needed. The shopkeeper spoke politely but without warmth. Others pushed past her, as if she took up too much space simply by existing. She learned to stand aside, to make herself smaller, though she already felt invisible. On her way home, she often wondered how something she could not change had become the reason for so much judgment. Even in her loneliness, she tried to remain kind. When someone dropped something, she helped pick it up. When a neighbor fell sick, she sent food quietly, without her name. Kindness was the only thing she felt she truly owned, and she refused to let the world take that from her. Nights were the hardest. The house felt larger after dark. She ate simple meals alone, washed her dishes, and sat by the window. Sometimes she watched families walking together, hearing laughter float through the air. It did not make her bitter, only tired. She missed being seen, not admired, just seen. Her husband had been the only one who never made her feel less. With him, she laughed freely. She spoke without fear. After his passing, she felt as though the world reminded her daily that she was alone. Still, she kept going because stopping was not an option. Survival became her quiet purpose. One afternoon, as she worked on a torn shirt, she heard children laughing outside. The sound surprised her. It had been a long time since laughter had passed near her home. She paused, listening. The laughter faded, but something about it stayed with her. It reminded her that joy still existed, even if it felt far away. The town itself was small but loud in opinion. People believed they knew everything about everyone. Stories spread quickly, often changing along the way. The widow had become one of those stories. No one asked her how she was. No one wondered what she had lost. They only saw what was easy to judge. Still, she never complained. In her mind, pain spoken aloud became heavier. She preferred to carry it quietly. Her strength was not loud or proud. It was gentle, steady, and hidden like roots growing deep underground. One evening, rain began to fall. The streets emptied quickly. She stood at her door, watching water wash the dust away. For a moment she felt calm. Rain did not judge. It fell on everyone the same. She closed her eyes and let the sound soothe her tired thoughts. Inside her heart there was still hope, though she barely admitted it to herself. Not hope for romance or grand happiness, but for simple belonging, to be accepted somewhere, to be spoken to with respect, to matter to someone again. She did not know that change was slowly moving toward her life. She did not know that unseen threads were already pulling her toward a different future. At that moment, she was only a widow in a quiet house, sewing clothes under a dim light, believing her story would always remain the same. But life has a way of surprising even the most tired hearts, and though she felt small in the eyes of the town, her kindness, patience, and quiet strength were about to be noticed by the ones who mattered most. The town was always filled with whispers, but the arrival of a new family created a different kind of attention. A cowboy had moved into the area with his young twins. His name was Jackson, and he was quiet, reserved, and carried the kind of strength that came from years of hard work. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and weathered by the sun, but there was a softness in his eyes that only appeared around his children. The twins, a boy and a girl aged 7 and 8, were lively but shy in this new place. Their mother had passed away the year before, and moving to a new town with their father had been difficult. Their hearts still carried grief, and their smiles often felt forced. Jackson rented a small house on the edge of town, near the fields where he could keep horses and work freely. Unlike other fathers, he was gentle with his twins. He understood that they were not just children, they were small people carrying the weight of loss. He tried to be strong for them while letting them feel what they needed to feel, whether sadness, anger, or quiet loneliness. But even with his care, the children often looked confused in the presence of strangers. The town had not yet accepted them, and in return, they had not yet trusted the town. One afternoon, as Jackson was unloading supplies from a wagon, the twins wandered down the dirt road. They had noticed a small house with flowers growing unevenly in the yard and a woman sitting by the window sewing. The girl, curious and shy, asked, "Papa, who is she?" Jackson glanced briefly. "That's just a neighbor." "Keep walking, okay?" But the twins' curiosity was stronger than caution. They approached the porch, stopping a few feet away, watching the widow work. The widow noticed them too. She paused her sewing and looked up, giving a small smile. She had seen children before, of course, but there was something in these twins' eyes, a quiet sadness, that made her heart ache. She waved gently, not wanting to startle them. The twins waved back hesitantly, then lingered, unsure whether to leave or stay. Over the next few days, the twins kept returning. They watched from a distance as the widow went about her chores, sweeping the steps, watering her small garden, and repairing torn clothing. They noticed small acts of kindness she performed for no one, helping a stray cat find shelter during rain, picking up a lost coin a child had dropped, and always smiling softly, even when no one was around. There was something comforting about her presence, something different from the adults who whispered or laughed at her in town. One morning, the twins wandered closer than usual. The boy tripped on the uneven dirt path, scraping his knee. He sat down, trying not to cry, but the pain was sharp. The widow noticed immediately. She walked over carefully, her long dress brushing the ground. Kneeling beside him, she said softly, "It's okay. Let me see." Her hands were gentle, her voice calm. She cleaned the scrape, applied a small bandage, and patted his shoulder. The boy looked up at her, surprised at how kind she was. He had expected words of scolding or laughter, but instead he found care. The girl watched silently, her eyes wide. When her brother was patched up, the widow turned to her and smiled warmly. "And you, little one, make sure you watch your steps," she said with a hint of humor. The girl's lips twitched, almost smiling, and for the first time in weeks she felt safe. The twins went home that day, chattering quietly about the kind woman who had helped them. Jackson noticed the change in their behavior. "Who were you talking to?" he asked. They hesitated, unsure whether to mention the widow. Finally, the boy said, "A lady, she helped me when I fell." Jackson frowned slightly. "Be careful, don't go too close, you don't know her." The twins nodded, but in their hearts they knew they wanted to go back. There was something about her that felt like home, even though they had only just met. As days passed, the twins' visits became more frequent. They would stand near the widow's porch, watching her sow or water plants. Sometimes she invited them to sit for a moment, giving them warm tea or a small cookie. She did not force conversation, she allowed silence when needed, and the twins responded in kind. Slowly, they began to open up. They shared little stories about their father, the farm, and the animals they missed from their old home. The widow listened carefully, never judging, never interrupting. Her attention felt rare and precious, something they had not realized they had been missing. Meanwhile, the town continued to gossip. People noticed the twins lingering at the widow's home and whispered about what kind of influence she might have. Some questioned why children of a respected cowboy would spend time with a woman like her. They did not see the quiet patience, the gentle laughter, or the kindness that drew the twins. To them, it was scandalous simply because it challenged their own prejudices. But the widow ignored the gossip, focusing only on the children. One afternoon, a small accident happened. A basket of laundry the widow had placed on her porch tipped over, spilling clothes onto the ground. The twins ran to help her pick them up. They laughed together as socks and shirts scattered everywhere. For the first time, the twins felt a sense of freedom. They were not being judged or scolded. They were simply helping, learning, and enjoying the company of someone who cared. The widow's laughter was light and warm, and the twins imitated it, giggling uncontrollably. Jackson noticed their absence at dinner that evening. "Where were you two?" he asked gently. The twins exchanged glances and finally told him, "We were helping the lady with laundry." Jackson's eyebrows rose. He was cautious but curious. "Helping the widow," he repeated. The twins nodded enthusiastically. "She's nice, Papa, she's really nice," said the boy. Jackson sighed. He had heard enough about the widow from town gossip to be wary. Yet he also noticed the change in his children's spirits, their laughter, their excitement, and the calm after spending time with her. He decided to withhold judgment, at least for now. Over the next few weeks, the bond between the twins and the widow grew stronger. She would teach them small skills: how to thread a needle, how to care for plants, how to fold clothes neatly. The twins absorbed everything eagerly, always returning home to share what they had learned. Jackson watched silently, sometimes joining in but often letting the widow take the lead. He saw that his children were happier, calmer, and more confident after their visits. The twins also learned to trust her completely. They told her about the mother they had lost, about the nights they cried themselves to sleep, and about their fear of being alone in a new town. The widow listened without interruption, never offering empty platitudes. She simply acknowledged their feelings and offered comfort. "I understand," she would say, "and it's okay to feel this way. You are not alone." The children felt a warmth they had not experienced in months, and slowly a sense of belonging began to grow. The town continued to watch, skeptical and judgmental. People whispered about the twins spending so much time with the widow and questioned Jackson's parenting choices. Yet Jackson saw only the positive effects. His children were smiling more, playing more, and talking about things they had not dared to mention before. For him, the widow's presence was a blessing, even if the town refused to see it. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, the twins sat on the widow's porch while she sewed quietly. The boy spoke softly. "Do you have anyone to be your family?" The widow paused, touched by the question. "I had a family once," she said. "But now I suppose my family is small, just me." The girl tilted her head. "Maybe we can be your family," she said shyly. The widow looked at them, surprised. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. No one had offered her such a gift in years, not words, not thought, not acceptance. And yet here were two children, small and innocent, offering her exactly that, a place in their hearts. Jackson, standing nearby, watched quietly. He had not expected this. He realized that while the town might judge, the children were making their own choices, guided by their hearts. And in that moment, he began to see the widow not as a subject of gossip, but as someone who had a true gift, patience, kindness, and the ability to care for children in a way that mattered more than appearances. From that day on, the twins' visits became a natural part of life. They helped in her garden, assisted with sewing projects, and simply spent time talking and laughing. The widow began to feel alive again, not because the town had changed, but because the children had chosen her, and through them, Jackson began to understand her worth. The relationship was not perfect, of course. There were moments of fear, misunderstanding, and town gossip that pierced their little bubble. But each time, the bond between the widow and the twins proved stronger than any outside voice. They had found in each other a connection that defied judgment and prejudice. And slowly, life that had once felt lonely and quiet began to fill with laughter, small joys, and hope. The quiet bond that had begun between the widow and the twins did not go unnoticed in the town. People whispered behind closed doors, their voices sharp with judgment. Some of the older women shook their heads as they watched the children linger at the widow's house. Why would he let them spend time with her? They muttered. It's not right. Others, less bold, only exchanged glances and made careful comments about how strange it was to see the children laughing with her. The town had already labeled the widow long ago, and now every smile she shared with the twins became fuel for gossip. Jackson felt the tension too, though he did his best to shield his children from it. He noticed people staring when he walked past the widow's house with the twins. Some children in the town began mimicking the whispers of their parents, repeating things they did not fully understand. "Why do you play at her house?" one child asked the twins at school. "She's too big, is she?" The twins were confused. They had never thought about the widow's size in a mean way. To them, she was safe, warm, and kind. They shrugged and said nothing, but the words stuck, and soon the teasing began. At home that evening, Jackson noticed his children were quieter than usual. He asked gently, "Is something wrong?" The boy hesitated. "Some kids at school said mean things about the lady we visit," he said softly. Jackson's brow furrowed. "What kind of things?" The twins exchanged nervous glances. The girl whispered, "They said she's not like other people, that she's different." Jackson took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of anger and sadness. He had known the town could be cruel, but he had hoped his children could find a safe place outside of that cruelty. That night, Jackson stayed awake thinking about the widow. He remembered the way his children's eyes lit up when they were around her, how their laughter returned, and how they seemed more at ease in her presence. He realized that despite the gossip and judgment, she was helping them in a way he could not. Yet, doubt crept into his mind. Could he trust her fully? Could he ignore what the town said and let his children continue visiting her freely? He knew it was a choice he would have to make carefully. The next morning, Jackson decided to observe from a distance. He followed the twins as they ran toward the widow's house, hesitant but eager. They carried small tools she had asked them to help with: rakes, watering cans, and little baskets of fresh vegetables. The widow greeted them with a gentle smile and a warm voice. "Good morning. Ready to help?" The twins nodded enthusiastically. Jackson watched as she guided them through small tasks, teaching patience, care, and skill. She was firm but never harsh. She praised effort rather than perfection, and every time the children made a mistake, she laughed lightly, making it feel natural rather than embarrassing. Jackson realized with a heavy but clear heart that the widow's influence on his children was positive. She was giving them attention, care, and guidance that was hard to find elsewhere. Yet he still feared what the town might say if people realized how close the children were to her. He also worried about the rumors. Even though he wanted to trust her, he had grown up in a town where appearances mattered more than kindness. Meanwhile, the town's gossip continued. Some people went as far as visiting the widow's house, pretending to drop off errands or goods, but really just watching to see if anything suspicious was happening. The widow, of course, carried on as if they were not there. She smiled politely, thanked them for any small favors, and returned to her work. Her quiet strength was remarkable. Even when the whispers reached her ears, she refused to let them change her behavior. She knew that anger or confrontation would accomplish nothing. Her love for the children and the simple joy she found in their presence mattered far more. Despite the scrutiny, the twins remained loyal to her. They began sharing small secrets and dreams, things they had never told anyone else. They talked about their mother, the animals they missed, and the small adventures they imagined having. The widow listened carefully, never judging, never interrupting. Her guidance was quiet but powerful. She showed them that it was okay to feel, to laugh, and to hope again. Jackson began to notice changes in his own behavior. He found himself observing the widow more often, analyzing her kindness and the impact she had on the twins. Slowly, admiration replaced skepticism. He realized that he had been influenced by town gossip more than by her actions. The more he watched, the more he saw a woman who was strong, caring, and patient. A woman who had endured loss, yet refused to let life harden her heart. He began to wonder if his own children's laughter was proof that judgment had no place in this situation. One afternoon, an incident occurred that tested everyone. The twins were playing near the garden when a neighbor's dog broke free and charged at them. The widow reacted instantly, shielding the children with her body and calling the dog away. Her courage startled Jackson, who had arrived moments later after hearing the commotion. The twins clung to her, crying but safe. Jackson felt a surge of gratitude and a new level of respect. He realized in that moment that her size and strength were not reasons for ridicule. They were part of her protective nature, part of what made her a safe presence for his children. The town, of course, did not see it that way. People whispered even louder after the incident. She's brave, yes, but is she really the right person for children? Some questioned. Jackson decided he could no longer let the town dictate his children's happiness. He had watched their trust, love, and joy grow in the widow's presence. That afternoon, he made a decision. He would confront his own doubts and protect the bond that was forming. Over the following weeks, Jackson began joining some of the twins' visits. At first, he observed quietly, not speaking much. But slowly, conversations began. The widow and Jackson talked about the children's routines, their schoolwork, and ways to help them feel safe and happy. Through these talks, Jackson saw more of her character, her intelligence, her patience, and her quiet humor. She was a partner in raising the children, someone who cared without expecting anything in return. The twins noticed the change too. They felt safe enough to ask questions, seek guidance, and share their little adventures with both the widow and their father. Jackson realized that the combination of his care and the widow's presence was helping the twins heal. They laughed more freely, slept better at night, and began to regain the innocence that had been clouded by loss. Even with these positive changes, challenges persisted. The town continued to gossip. Some parents warned their children against playing with the twins, implying that the widow was different or strange. Schoolchildren teased, but the twins were now stronger. They had learned from the widow that their worth was not determined by what others said. They defended her in small ways, explaining her kindness and sharing stories of her help. Slowly, the tide began to turn, and a few curious neighbors began to see what the twins already knew, that she was gentle, kind, and trustworthy. The widow, despite her growing bond with the family, never took her role for granted. She understood the responsibility she carried. Children trusted her, and she could not let them down. She planned activities carefully, taught lessons with patience, and offered guidance without pressure. She did not seek approval from the town or recognition for her efforts. Her only goal was to provide love, support, and stability for two children who had experienced loss too early in life. One rainy afternoon, the twins asked her a question that surprised her. "Do you miss your family?" the boy asked. She paused, holding a needle mid-stitch. "Yes," she said softly, "I miss them every day, but I also know that life gives us chances to love again in different ways." The girl nodded thoughtfully. "So we can be your family?" she asked quietly. The widow felt tears in her eyes. For years she had lived quietly, accepting judgment and loneliness. And here were two children, offering her the very thing she had missed most: acceptance, trust, and love. Jackson, who had been standing nearby, felt a deep respect and admiration for her. He realized that the bond forming between the widow and the twins was not something to fear or judge. It was a pure, honest connection built on trust and care. He began to let go of his own doubts and allowed the children to choose freely. Despite all the challenges, the trio continued to grow closer. The widow's quiet strength, the twins' loyalty, and Jackson's careful guidance created a small circle of safety and trust. The town's whispers continued, but they mattered less with each passing day. The children's laughter, the shared meals, and the simple daily routines formed a bond that could not be broken by gossip or judgment. The widow often thought about the changes in her life. She had never imagined that grief and judgment would lead to a new kind of family. The children had reminded her of hope, of patience, and of love that existed outside of societal expectations. Jackson had reminded her that even cautious hearts could open to trust and acceptance. Together they were slowly creating a new world, one where love mattered more than appearances, and kindness mattered more than gossip. And in that small, quiet town, life continued. The winds of change moved slowly, but the seeds of understanding, trust, and family had been planted. The widow had endured judgment and ridicule, yet she had found something far more important: a connection that transcended prejudice, a family chosen by love, and children who had seen her for who she truly was. The bond between the widow and the twins had grown stronger each day, and now it was no longer a quiet secret. Everyone in town began to notice the changes, not just the laughter of the children, but the way they spoke about her, the stories they shared, and the joy that radiated from their little family unit. Jackson observed silently at first, still cautious of gossip, but feeling more certain about what he had seen for weeks. The twins were happier than they had been since their mother's passing, and the widow's patience and care had created a sense of security he had not realized they were missing. One bright morning, the twins came running to the widow's house, full of excitement. They were holding a small bundle of wildflowers picked from the field. "We have a surprise for you," the girl exclaimed, her eyes sparkling. The boy nodded enthusiastically. "We wanted to show you how much you mean to us." The widow smiled, touched by their thoughtfulness, and gently took the flowers. She felt her heart swell with emotion. For so long she had lived quietly, unnoticed and judged, and now she was being chosen, not by strangers, not by gossip, but by children who saw her heart. Jackson watched from the edge of the yard, his chest tightening with emotion. He realized that the town's whispers and judgment no longer mattered. What mattered was this: the happiness of his children and the love they had found in someone who had experienced loss herself. He approached slowly, giving the widow a small, respectful nod. "You've done a lot for them," he said quietly. She looked at him, surprised at his sincerity. "I just care for them," she replied softly. "They remind me of why life is worth living." Jackson nodded, understanding the depth of her words more than she could know. Despite the growing closeness, the town continued to murmur. People who had once ignored her now questioned why the children spent so much time with the widow. Some approached Jackson, hinting that perhaps he was making a mistake. He listened politely, but inside he felt a quiet strength. He had seen the widow's patience, her kindness, and the way his children flourished in her presence. He no longer feared judgment. He had begun to see the truth, that character mattered far more than appearances. One afternoon, the widow invited the twins and Jackson to help her plant a small vegetable garden behind her house. She handed the children small seeds and gently instructed them on how to plant them carefully. "Every seed needs patience," she said. "You cannot rush it. You must care for it just like you care for people." The twins listened attentively, planting each seed with care. Jackson helped too, watching silently as the children worked together and laughed softly at the mistakes they made. It was a simple activity, but it represented something deeper: growth, trust, and the beginning of a family that chose love over judgment. The twins began to talk more openly about their feelings with the widow. They told her about their sadness, about missing their mother, and about how hard it was to fit into the new town. She listened without interruption, offering comfort and understanding. "It's okay to feel sad," she told them. "It doesn't make you weak. Feeling shows that your heart is alive." The children felt understood, and for the first time in a long while, they believed that it was safe to share their emotions. Jackson noticed the change in his children and in himself. He realized that he had been holding back out of fear, fear of gossip, fear of judgment, fear of doing something unconventional. But the widow had shown him that love and care were stronger than fear. She had proven that children could flourish when given trust, patience, and kindness. Slowly, Jackson let go of his doubts and began to accept her fully, realizing that she was no longer just a helper for his children. She was becoming a part of their family. One evening after dinner, the twins asked the widow to sit with them by the fire. "We want you to be part of our family," the girl said shyly. The boy nodded in agreement. "Yes, we choose you," he added firmly. The widow felt tears prick her eyes. For years she had endured judgment and loneliness, and now she was being chosen freely, not out of obligation or pity, but because these children had seen her heart. She held them close, feeling a sense of belonging that she had not known since before her husband passed. Jackson, watching this, felt a deep sense of gratitude and respect. He realized that the love the widow offered was not just for the children, it was for all of them. She had opened her heart without expectation, and in return, they had been allowed to heal and grow. He stepped forward, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "We're a family now," he said quietly. She nodded, feeling warmth spread through her chest. Together, they had built a family founded on trust, understanding, and choice. The town began to notice the change too, though slowly. Children who had once teased the twins now saw how happy they were. Some neighbors approached the widow, cautiously at first, and thanked her for her kindness. Even the gossipers began to soften, realizing that their judgments were based on appearances rather than truth. The widow did not demand respect, but she received it through her actions, her patience, and the undeniable love she had shown the children. With the children's choice clear, Jackson began to include the widow more in family activities. They went for walks in the fields, worked together on chores, and shared meals. The twins thrived in this environment, their laughter filling the house and the yard. The widow felt a sense of purpose and joy that she had not known in years. She realized that love could come in many forms, and sometimes, family was not defined by blood, but by choice and care. One sunny afternoon, as they all sat on the porch watching the sunset, the twins held the widow's hands tightly. "We love you," the girl whispered. The boy nodded, smiling brightly. The widow felt her heart swell. She had endured judgment, ridicule, and loneliness, but she had also endured herself. Her patience, her kindness, her willingness to care even when it hurt. And now she was being rewarded in the most meaningful way possible. She had been chosen. Jackson looked at the three of them together and felt a profound respect. He had doubted, hesitated, and worried about what the town would think, But the children's choice was clear. The widow was family. Her presence had brought joy, stability, and love back into their lives. For Jackson, this was a lesson in trust, humility, and understanding. He realized that sometimes love and family come from unexpected places, and they can heal wounds that nothing else can. The townspeople continued to watch, slowly learning a lesson of their own. They began to see the widow not as someone to be mocked, but as a person of kindness and courage. Her reputation changed, not through words or confrontation, but through her consistent actions. Children who had once teased the twins began to approach them cautiously, curious about the woman who had become a source of happiness and care. Gradually, the community began to accept that appearances were not everything, and that the heart mattered most. The widow, Jackson, and the twins began to form a new rhythm of life. Mornings were filled with small chores, laughter, and lessons about patience and care. Afternoons were for walks, games, and storytelling. Evenings were quiet, filled with reflection, warmth, and gentle conversation. The bond they shared became a source of strength for all of them. They had survived loss, judgment, and loneliness, and now they had found a family built on choice, love, and respect. As seasons changed, the twins grew stronger, happier, and more confident. They learned not only practical skills from the widow, but also the importance of kindness, patience, and resilience. The widow, in turn, felt a renewed sense of purpose and joy. She realized that even in a world that could be cruel and judgmental, love had the power to create miracles. She had been lonely for so long, but now she had a family that had chosen her wholeheartedly. Jackson and the widow worked together, building a home filled with trust, understanding, and laughter. They had learned that family is not only about blood, but about who stands by you in moments of need, who cares for you without expectation, and who chooses to stay in your life despite the world's judgment. Their story became an example to the town, showing that love, patience, and kindness could overcome prejudice and fear. One evening, as they watched the stars appear in the sky, the widow reflected on her journey. She had lived quietly, enduring whispers, judgment, and loss. She had felt invisible, misunderstood, and alone. But through patience, kindness, and the love she had given freely, she had found something more valuable than she could have imagined. A family that chose her, children who trusted her, and a man who finally saw her true worth. The twins snuggled close to her, their small hands gripping hers, and Jackson placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. They were no longer just a widow and two children, they were a family. Their love was simple, genuine, and unshakable. The town may have judged, whispered, and doubted, but it could not diminish the bond that had been created. The widow had endured, and now she thrived, not because the world had changed, but because love had found its way, guiding hearts to what truly mattered. And so life moved forward. The widow, once shamed for her size and misunderstood by the town, had found belonging and joy in a family she had never expected. The twins had healed, laughed, and grown under her care. Jackson had learned to trust his heart over the whispers of others. Together, they created a new story, one of love, resilience, and the beauty of being chosen for who you truly are.